So I want to welcome you. Again, as we are joining the meeting, please go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat with your name, pronouns, your city, and anything else you'd like us to know about you. And then as we go through the meeting, if you would, stay on mute, but if you think of a question, go ahead and put it in the chat so it doesn't get forgotten. And then we'll take some breaks and take a question and answer throughout the meeting. So again, welcome. Mary Ann Reese, I'm the chapter chair for San Gorgonio chapter, which is Riverside and San Bernardino counties. And I see Nancy waving at me there. So if you want to be on video, that's great, but it's fine to stay off. And again, we're asking everyone to stay on mute and letting folks know that this meeting will be recorded. So I'm going to get right into our slide deck here and share my screen. So I won't be able to see everyone's lovely faces at the whole same time, but we'll start sharing now. In just a minute. I got to get rid of something here. There we go. Desktop. Whoops, wait a minute. Okay, let me try that one more time. A little bit of a problem here. There we go. All right. So tonight, some of you have probably heard about 30 by 30 through some recent news from the Biden campaign or Biden presidency and our governor. So tonight we're going to give you a little bit more information about this agenda for California and the US, an agenda for nature, climate, and communities. We're going to discuss the 30 by 30 framework that is trying to connect the extinction crisis and the climate crisis together and describe what efforts currently look like in the US and California to protect 30% of waters and lands in nature by 2030. And what are some of the ways that we can take action to advance this agenda? So those are kind of an overview of what we'll talk about tonight. The background on this and global context is that, the idea of galvanizing the whole world around a conservation goal for our planet's survival originated in 2016 by world-renowned biologist E.L. Wilson in a book that he wrote titled Half Earth, Our Planet's Fight for Life. In that book, Wilson says that in order to avoid a global tipping point of mass extinction and irreversible climate change, we have to set aside 50% of the Earth's surface, land, and water by 2050. In the next slide, we'll kind of look at the biodiversity case for that. The threats that we're facing are the reason for this really big goal for the world and starting here in our country. A 2019 report found that more than 1 million species are at risk of extinction. The studies actually consider the most comprehensive analysis of the state of the world's wildlife diversity ever undertaken. And it uplifted that it's not only species that are at risk, but also threatened along with them are the life support functions that these species and ecosystems provide. Everything from clean air and water and food systems, flood control and climate regulation, as well as a host of other services are at risk from climate change and mass extinction. Let's see, can we make sure everyone is muted? We've got some folks that aren't muted, so please make sure to mute yourself And we'll have time for questions and interaction later. Thank you. So the threats are, that unless we act now to combat climate change, our planet's going to become uninhabitable for both wildlife and humans. And public land and open land plays a part in this. Public lands are a major source of climate emissions due to land management practice, as well as development of fossil fuels. Industrialization and development consume a natural area the size of a football field in the US every 30 seconds. Fossil fuel extraction on public lands currently contributes to 25% of US greenhouse gas emissions. The Trump administration accelerated that damage since 2016. More than 5 million acres of our public lands have been opened to fossil fuels. And that doesn't even include the most recent, just before the change of administration, opening of the Arctic Reserve. So every acre of forest, grassland, and open space, and that includes deserts, that we lose exacerbates the problem, not just because it further shrinks habitat, but because it removes one of our most important tools for capturing carbon and fighting the climate crisis. So we have a big opportunity here to protect lands, end fossil fuel extraction, and move towards stopping the extinction and climate change. Right now, 12% of lands in the US are currently protected. Only 12%, we're looking for 30. Human development covers about 35% of the continental US. But still, that's 65% of our land that is still largely in its natural condition. The US ranks as one of the top 5 countries in the world for total wilderness quality lands that remain. So it means that we have a lot of land to work with. For reducing climate emissions, studies have shown that smart land conservation and management practices could offset 21% of US greenhouse gas emissions. And that's why ending oil and gas leasing and development on public lands is an important part of the strategy, along with protecting carbon-rich lands like forests and wetlands. In August of 2019, the United Nations Intergovernmental Climate Change, or the IPCC, released their most recent report that stressed that we're already in fact seeing climate impacts in land, and we need to improve land and management practice to address the climate crisis. The report also cited the importance that part that lands play in drawing down and storing carbon dioxide pollution from the atmosphere. That means that protecting lands is a critical strategy for the climate, along with other strategies that we regularly think about, like reducing greenhouse emissions from vehicles and power plants. Folks don't normally think about protecting lands as part of saving our climate, but they play an important part. So what does 30 by 30 in the US look like? It looks like, we want to mitigate the climate crisis, help wildlife migrate. I'm going to do something here real quick, and adapt to changing ecosystems, and stop fossil fuel extraction on public lands. And as part of that, build a more expansive and inclusive conservation ethic, that centered diversity and equity. One of the things that we have to consider is that scientists are globally aligned on the fact that in order to achieve the ambitious goal of 50% by 2050, we have to set some intermediate goals of 30% of lands by 2030. And before I really get into this, I'd like to make sure that we lift up the importance of building our movement towards these goals in a way that centers justice and equity, so that wildlife, climate, and communities can thrive together in the future. First and foremost, the history of public lands in the US includes forced removal of Native peoples, treaty and human rights violations, and discrimination. The 30 by 30 agenda is an opportunity to make a course correction from our own history of conservation ideologies that ignored, discounted, and excluded the presence, practices, and connections of indigenous inhabitants to the land. We can do this by supporting the conservation and stewardship vision and priorities of tribal nations as we take on this effort. So what sort of momentum does this have in the US at this point? Well, we'll be working in coalition with grassroots. One second here. Why is this? There we go. With grassroots and decision makers and centering equity and justice. But the momentum is that January 27th, President Biden issued an executive order to protect 30% of lands by 2030. The Sierra Club, as you can see on this slide. Can we make sure everyone's on mute? Okay. I'm going to stop for just a second here and ask that everyone put yourself on mute. Thank you. And I'm going to, okay. So this is a part of the Sierra Club's press release. Okay. I'm going to stop here for just a second and ask that, Moises, can I make you co-host?
Yeah, sure. And I think that was Jan Anderson, and she just muted herself, so we're good.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to just take a second here and go ahead and find you and make you co-host so that if we have any other, there we go. Okay. All right, get back to the sharing here. So to get back to our slideshow here, the president just placed this executive order to protect 30% lands by 2030. So big, bold action is exactly what we need to confront the climate crisis that we face. The goal presents an opportunity to uplift public lands as a solution for climate, healthy wildlife, and a more equitable future. This opportunity gives us a chance to work towards a more just and equitable conservation movement, one in which all people are welcome and have access to the outdoors and all its benefits. So at this point, I'd like to stop for just a minute and see if we have any questions in the chat. Moises, do you see any questions we need to address at this point?
We do not have any questions at this point.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll have plenty of opportunity later. And I'm going to move ahead into what it kind of looks like to build our 30 by 30 agenda here in California. The climate change threats and risks are very apparent here in California, and states and local governments are the largest holders of conservation lands in the country and have tools at their disposal, such as state-funded open space programs, designation of wildlife corridors, and expanding states and local parks. In California, we have 686 species at risk of extinction. This is probably increased since this slide deck was put together. A 20% decline in California native species to date, and 1 million acres of natural area lost between 2001 and 2017. Wildfire and sea level rise were at record levels in 2021. So, the designation of wildlife corridors, expanding state and local parks are all things that can be done at the state level. These could all lead to double the land that we are currently protected by the local jurisdictions. While the response to the coronavirus pandemic is really rightly focused right now on immediate needs of public health and economic hardship, we know that investing in our public lands can contribute to the economic recovery. And we also know that more than ever, our public lands play an important role in physical and mental health in a socially distant world. So we acknowledge that we have barriers to this moving forward, but they're not insurmountable. And as you can see, that about 8% 35% of our lands are national park, 25% national forest, and then 25% Bureau of Land Management. The rest of it in our protected lands is broken up between various entities. 22% is protected, 22 million acres. 8% of the protected lands in California, I'm sorry, make up 8% of nationally protected lands. And California has the second most protected lands of any state in the US, only behind Alaska. So the good news is that so much of the important work that Sierra Club and other environmental protection organizations are doing right now is to protect public lands in California are already being doing, and they are at the heart of this 30 by 30 agenda. So we'd like to touch on one example, which is relevant to communities here in the Inland Empire and throughout our California desert communities. And that is the Desert Renewable Energy Conservation Plan, or the DRECP. And I'm going to hand this over to Moises to go through the next few slides about the DRECP.
Thank you, Marianne. Appreciate that very much. I do want to uplift that there's some really good questions in the chat box regarding the 30 by 30 presentation you just gave. Would you like to address those now or later?
Why don't we go ahead and take those now and then.
Okay. Yeah, so you have one here by Cheryl. She says, so is it beneficial for those of us concerned with climate change to purchase land and donate it so it's not destroyed, or does it need to be done on a larger coordinated effort?
I would imagine that any way to protect land will be part of this campaign, and purchasing land and having it protected. If that's within someone's capability, that would be one option. Another thing that some folks have done is if they have land, like for example, ranchers up in the eastern, or in the Owens Valley, east of the Sierra, will work with the Eastern Sierra Land Trust and plan that their land be donated when it's time in their will. So those are options. Moises, do you have any answer on that?
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I would mention. It's definitely it's going to have to be a coordinated effort at the big picture, and definitely everything counts. So we can definitely connect you to various land trusts that we're partners with, that you can work with and providing or donating land, and that's actually a wonderful, generous action. So thank you for asking.
Yes. Are there other questions?
Yeah, there's another question here by Margaret. Is there a list that Sierra Club has identified as the public lands in the San Gorgonio chapter? She's alluding to lands in the territories of the San Gorgonio chapter that would be available to add to the 30% goal.
We, as far as I am aware, we aren't close to that yet. We have some, like when Moises talks about the DRECP, this will be an indication of some lands that are mostly all in our geography of Riverside and San Bernardino counties. But I'm sure that as we get further into this process, there will be many more areas identified. Another area that is identified that's partially in our geography is the eastern end of the San Gabriel Mountains. That's being worked on for additional protection. Can you think of any others, Moises?
I can, but I think for the interest of time, I think we're good there, and we can move on to the next question if you're okay.
Sure.
Julian asks, what did President Biden's executive order call for in order to achieve 30 by 30? And I could chime in on that after you're done, Marianne, if you want to go first.
If you want to go ahead with that, if we have time now, or that might be a good one for.
That's okay.
Go ahead.
So the main thing that we have here is we've just been provided, just like an executive order. In this particular case, it's just a framework. So no specific details, big ideas, and that's why a lot of the work that we're going to be doing between now and the next 2 years are going to be about getting to defining what the executive order actually can mean. So, one of the major things immediately is that they're hitting the pause button on new oil and gas leasing for a couple months, which is awesome to hear. The other piece, and now it's up to us to kind of figure out, like, hey, let's push to and extend that and make that permanent. And the other piece is bringing in the renewable energy piece to it, and that's going to be very tricky, I think, because all types of energy, including renewable energy, although it's better than fossil fuels. The renewable energy, if it's not done correctly, it's obviously very impactful and a detriment to wild spaces and public lands. So that's one piece that we're going to be putting a lot of effort and energy and focus into it, making sure that it's a balanced approach, because that 30 by 30 campaign is calling for a lot of renewable energy, and knowing that most of the available public space is not on the East Coast, it's on the West Coast. We're going to see a lot of ideas and designs to putting that renewable energy in the desert spaces, or in open spaces in California, because that's where we still have a lot of that available. Yeah, so just to boil it down, a lot of details are to be worked out, and I think that's the kind of work that we're going to be doing over the next, immediately in the next couple days, weeks, and extending into a couple of years. Anything to add, Marianne?
No, I think that's just a really good lead into your discussion about the DRECP.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. So my name is Moises Cisneros. I'm an associate organizer for the Sierra Club. I've been on board for almost 2 years, and I was attracted to the desert kind of late in my life. I discovered it when I was in college for the first time. I took my nephews with me, and I'd always heard so many great things about the Mojave Desert and Joshua Tree. So we went on a camping trip to the Mojave Desert, and it was completely, like, it just changed. It changed my life in 2 ways. One, I had grown up with one of my nephews, and he has asthma. The whole time we were there, not once did he reach for his inhaler. And I saw him like more energetic and just more full of life. And I immediately felt this was a very special place. Definitely a magical place that, obviously I'm preaching to the choir, but for me, it came in later in life, and I've never looked back since then. I just always want to go back to it. And it's something that, it's a personal thing for myself, but I want to talk about the importance of it, the importance of the desert that it brings, not only just to us as individuals, but the effects that conserving the desert as it is has on our overall well-being and survival. So next slide. I've been asked to present an overview of one of the most pressing local environmental challenges that we face today. I'll start off by providing a brief background on what's called the Desert Renewable Energy Conservation Plan, otherwise known as the DRECP. And the words in this, the renewable energy is one piece. Okay, that's one entity, and conservation is another entity. That's just one way to kind of look at this, because these are two elements that are, with this plan, are trying to be balanced, and we're trying to make these two things work together. The renewable energy community along with the conservation community. Those are the main players. There's other players in the conversation. We'll go over that. But just the name itself kind of gives it away. It's the renewable energy and the conservation community working together to make something very important work. The DRECP, just again, background, was formed only after 8 years of a lot of deliberations and discussions and meetings led by the Bureau of Land Management, the California Energy Commission, the California Fish and Wildlife, local municipalities, including San Bernardino County, all the counties in this area, and over 50 community organizations, thousands of comments from citizens. So it was a big deal. It's as you can see in the map here, it covers a lot of land. And it's actually 10 million acres. And basically, just to kind of put it in perspective, the size that this covers is basically the size of all of Hawaii and Connecticut combined. So it's a big piece. And it's basically, again, it's a careful, balanced approach to the needs of renewable energy developers, recreationists, and conservationists. So the main thing that you can see that this was a success, okay, this basically plans, policies and guidelines for developers to come in and build and do it in a streamlined, efficient way that's not destroying the most critical places in these areas. The big thing that came out of this after 8 years was that with all the stakeholders involved, there was no lawsuits. With this kind of work, traditionally, when these many stakeholders, you'll find that someone is just totally out, they're pissed, it's not working for them, and a lawsuit is filed. In this case, it's nobody, it didn't get to that point. It was definitely where the communities, the stakeholders, they all compromised. And so we felt it was a good approach. It was the right way to do it. And so everyone celebrated, like 8 years in the making, and it went through, and we're all celebrating a balanced approach to conservation and renewable energy, amongst other issues. Next slide, please. However, so this ended in 2016. And in 2017, under the new administration, we got wind that they wanted to do away with all that work. And so we got into defense mode, right? And just trying to make sure that that didn't happen. And about 4 years into it, we're like, wow, we're getting away with it. Like, thank God it didn't get touched. And we're like counting down, right? Like, counting down the days. And literally about, it was like 10 days prior to the end of this last administration, they basically devised a way to leave a final imprint on the California desert. And they announced, meaning the Bureau of Land Management under the last administration, announced the draft proposal to basically unravel the DRECP, unravel all the 8 years, close to more like even 8 years of negotiation and compromises, and automatically by doing by adding an amendment to it, or a proposed amendment, that kicks off a 90-day comment period, which officially will end April 15th. The amendment that they wrote eliminates protection of public lands, including Juniper Flats, Pipes Canyon, Granite Mountains near Lucerne Valley, Panamint Valley, Eagle Mountain, the Chickwalla Bench, to name a few. At the same time, the proposal opens up nearly 500,000 acres of those same lands to industrial renewable development and mining and other extraction intensive industries. So that's obviously a big concern. On the face, the Department of Interior from the last administration said they were doing it because they're making federal land available for renewable energy projects in hopes of balancing the uses as well as keeping the lights on and the air conditioning blowing, unquote. So, that's their excuse. However, we believe that that's just not the case, because in reality, the California desert is already providing more than 2/3 of the planned and existing utility scale solar energy projects on public lands. And at the end of the day, it's more than enough acreage to help meet the state of California's ambitious energy clean goals. So we just think that it's just a front for their mining lobby and good friends in those industries. Next slide. So if we can fight that off and the DRECP stays in place, the benefits are immense. Obviously, the developers, the renewable energy developers, like that there's a streamlined process for their projects, meaning the environmental community has agreed not to fight them as long as they're doing it within these parameters. Otherwise, rather, if they unravel this DRECP, they're going to be facing a lot of challenges, right? Because we're not in agreement on something. So it's not going to speed up anything. It's going to slow it down. Now, obviously, there's a lot of, as Marianne mentioned, there's a whole lot of unique plant and endangered wildlife species, and in the desert is not. They're definitely part of that. In fact, the desert, the desert area here is one of 36 biodiversity hotspots in the planet. And it's amazing how much amazing species are there, wildlife, flora and fauna. And so we want to protect all those areas. And it's also a place that that's important now, especially for our mental health. This area will protect areas such as trailheads for hikers, bird watchers, rock hounds, night sky observers. The list goes on and on. These are all things that are important for our health benefits as well. And also, a lot of areas that exist in the DRECP are needed for the benefit of the minority community, people of color, and tribes who either without it wouldn't have access to public spaces or use this area for sacred and cultural spaces. Next slide, please. And then also, next slide. Yeah. We're also looking at this as the DRECP area has a huge economic impact. This pristine environment generates billions a year for gateway municipalities. And the economic impact through desert tourism and travel is $7.6 billion, producing 73,000 jobs and $609 million in tax revenue for local and state government. So obviously there's a lot of mom and pop shops and entrepreneurs in the gateway areas of these public lands that benefit from a lot of the tourism that comes from overseas and domestically. Next slide. And I think for myself, this is the most important reason why we want to keep DRECP intact. And that's that it's a carbon sequestration sink. It plays a critical role for the climate. Its soil and plant root systems actually hold a lot of the carbon that we put out into the air. A study published in the scientific journal Nature Climate Change states that deserts already account for approximately 1/4 of the current on-land carbon capture today. It basically means that dry lands, which cover about 40% of the non-ocean Earth, have a potential to mop up the carbon dioxide that we're adding to the atmosphere. Next slide. So in closing, the next 90 days are super critical in defending the DRECP. I had mentioned earlier that we're now in a 90-day comment period. However, as a community, the Sierra Club and a bunch of other allies and partners are actually trying to not even go through that process and get the Biden administration to rescind the whole thing as a sham. We're right now we're working with grass tops, elected officials, and agency heads to make that happen. And so that's phase one of the plan right now. And phase two, if that doesn't work out, we're very hopeful that that will happen. But if it doesn't, then phase two pops in, and we shift into high gear, activating our membership, our volunteers, to ensure that that the community at large gets involved. There's op-eds. We're going to you to help us write letters to your local electeds, that we're visiting together via Zoom and meeting with them and explaining to them why this is important to our community. So there's two phases in place. Right now it's grass tops, but we're already thinking about, plan B and phase two. So there's definitely room for all of you to play a role in this. We have internal roles to play, external roles to play, depending on your talents and your personality. Your time available, whether it's just a one-time touch point, we can use you, or if you have more time available, we can definitely use you as well. So don't be shy. We'd love to have you join this team and bring your talents to the challenge. And that's it. That's all I have, Marianne. I'm happy to take questions, or now or later.
Well, I don't see any new questions in the chat. So I think we'll go ahead, and if folks have something, put them in there, and then we'll move on and be able to answer more questions at the end, if anything comes up as you think about this. So thank you, Moises. I'm going to move on to our next slide. Even before President Biden announced his executive order, our governor announced his own executive order for California to actually lead the country towards 30 by 30. Our state director, Catherine Phillips, put this note in her press release about this, and that the governor has helped move the nation forward, establishing California as the first state to embrace 30 by 30. Last year, there were bills in the state assembly, there were bills in Congress to get this process started, but now we have it already going with executive orders. So the Sierra Club is kind of just at the beginning. We had that question about what's in our area, what can we do? We're at the beginning of the journey to build our statewide 30 by 30 strategy. This February 20th, the California Conservation Committee, which is our statewide conservation organization, is having a meeting. And most of that meeting, there'll be some business done, but it's going to be centered around the 30 by 30 campaign. Anyone is welcome to join, and we'll have information later on how to do that. The goal is to build a collaborative vision between our national campaigns in the state, which Moises is a organizer for our national campaign of land, water, and wildlife. So we have national campaigns. We have our Sacramento lobbying team, which is Sierra Club California. We have 13 chapters in California, and we have grassroots network teams. And Sierra Club has over 500,000 members and supporters here in California. So we're excited to develop a strategy over the next year, and hope that some folks here will join us in actions like this one that was taken back when we could do this sort of thing. but there's other ways to interact now. In the meantime, I'd like to uplift that a lot of the work is already being done to preserve and conserve our open space. And I'm going to give you a brief snapshot of a couple of things in addition to the Desert Renewable Energy Conservation Plan that you heard about from Moises. In California, we also have folks that are working on supporting strong revisions of the Sierra and Sequoia National Forest plans. They're being updated and a final plan is expected to be released later in the year. So we're working with our allies to advocate for new wilderness areas. Like I mentioned, up in San Gabriel Mountains, there's some work on new wilderness and national recreation area there. Working on wild and scenic river protections and stronger safeguards for wildlife. And we'll also advocate for plans that improve the carbon storage capabilities of our forests. So we're a number of us, and in this picture you see Kim Floyd here, our conservation chair for San Gorgonio chapter, as well as Brandon and Jenny, who are working on Salton Sea issues. So we're working with local and statewide allies to advocate for the restoration of the Salton Sea, to restore habitat for the 400 species of birds that rely on the Salton Sea as a stopover on the Pacific Flyway, but also to mitigate the public health crisis. The communities living in the around the Salton Sea are exposed to the toxic pollution from the playa around the Salton Sea as it evaporates. So efforts have been in place for years and continue to replenish some of the water and restore some of the playa areas around the edges of the Salton Sea that are drying up and causing pollution. In the Eastern Sierra, we have our chapter and local organizers are engaged in work to protect precious wild places and cultural sites from destructive mining developments. In the Bodie Hills area, Conglomerate Mesa, which is a big wild space up in the, I guess it would be the northern Owens Valley area, and then cultural sites and mining developments, also including the Panamint Valley. And these were threatened by the opening of the DRECP and also by the previous administration with extraction industries, and we're working to prevent that. So yeah, here's just another slide about what I was just talking about, the Salton Sea, desert areas, and the national forests. So what you can do right now, and we'll get some questions in the chat here. I started to see some stuff coming through. If you're interested, you can learn more at the Conservation Committee meeting that is going to be held on Saturday, February 20th, starting at 9:30. There'll be some business done. You probably want to tune in about 10, and it will, the 30 by 30 portion of the meeting will last through and after lunchtime, I believe, with several different speakers and much more information than we've given you here tonight. So that's one thing you can do. And we'll provide that information. This link here that I've got in the slideshow is to a very short survey that you could take to indicate to us what your interest is. And we can send you further information, get you on our list for updates and that sort of thing by filling out this survey. And we'll link this into the chat, and we will also email this link to anyone that's on to everyone that actually registered for the call. We had 60 people register. I'm not sure how many we have on the call, but we'll get that to you. So the interest survey, and then I'm going to leave you with some of the questions that we'll be working on to begin, locally driven 30 by 30 priorities. And I know we've had some questions here about what can be done and buying land and various things. So Here's some things that we'll be considering and that you might think about it as you consider your participation in this. Is, you know, what is your own community done in the past that contributes to efforts to protect 30% of land? And if you had some experience with that effort, for example, I'm thinking of San Jacinto Wildlife Preserve was protected by the local community. The Chino Hills State Park was protected in 1984, I believe, by the local community activists. So, and then, you know, thinking about what locations in the state could help contribute to climate resilience and protect 30% of the land. And how do we, you know, achieve those protections? Are they roadless areas, community partnerships, wilderness designations, or just protecting them from fossil fuel development? And then who should have a seat at the table? Stakeholders, environmental justice organizations, community groups, and business owners. So these are all considerations for future engagement that we'll be taking on as Sierra Club, and hope you'll take this ride with us. So I'm going to thank you all for joining. I'm going to stop sharing and see if we have some questions here. And I see there's some questions and answers in the chat. Do we have any, Moises, that have not been covered?
I just saw this one. Has there been any effort to protect the Corona Hills area of West La Sierra Avenue north of Cajalco?
Oh, that's a good area. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, and I think I would say that that's exactly what we want all of the chapters in California to be doing, right? To assess what's important to them. I think, Marianne, that's what you've been advocating for, and organize, like, you know, getting all the folks at with the state level as well as within our chapter to do. So thank you, Marianne, for kind of, you know, helping us do that.
Oh, well, this is such important stuff for our future. And as we close up here, I think we've got the questions answered. I wanted to just make a couple of other announcements here. We have on the call here Julianne, who has been leading with a couple of other folks on our Trail Talk series. And some of you may have joined those. The next one, Julianne, you want to just mention the next Trail Talk real quick? Are you still on here?
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. The next Trail Talk will be with our outings leader colleague, Christina Torres, and it's going to be on the third Wednesday of the month, as it is usually, at 7 p.m. And the next one will be Wednesday, February 17th. And Christina will lead us through desert hikes and desert hiking safety. So we just did a little prep session this evening, and she's got a marvelous program. So it's going to be really delightful. And she's such an experienced leader, so I think people will enjoy it.
Well, thank you. Yes, the previous ones have been well attended and enjoyed, and we are also recording those to keep them available for folks that don't make it. Then the next thing I would like to just announce is we talked a little tiny bit about the Salton Sea tonight. Our next meeting on the first Tuesday of the month, which is March 2nd, will be on the Salton Sea and current efforts to continue the work to get some of the promised improvements done and aim for future improvements to be added. So I hope we'll see some of you on the Salton Sea meeting. I'm going to put the link to the, maybe I'm not. I'm going to send you the link to the chat here, to the survey. I don't have it with me right now, so we'll send everyone an email that you'll get shortly after this meeting. And if anybody's interested, we can send you a recording of this. Are there any other questions or comments? And
there is one last one question here.
Okay.
Marianne, would you like me to read it?
Is this the one here from Cheryl?
Yeah.
Okay, let's see, a lot of money. This is one that I don't have an answer to. Moises, do you have a thought on this one?
Yeah, my inclination on this would be that not all lands are created equal.
Mhm.
So with that in mind, like that's where the sticky stuff is at. This is where it gets deep, okay? Right? Like, 10 acres is 10 acres in a non-sensitive land worth 1 acre in a, sensitive wild space land. And those are the challenging questions that we have to, like, it's not going to be easy. And that's the kind of conversations and, like, the ideation that comes when we all come together and just discuss these things. So I don't have a straight answer for that, but all I would say is I would encourage Cheryl to join us in these kinds of conversations over the next couple of months and year.
Okay, I'm grabbing the link right now for the. Okay, I'm gonna put the link in the chat here for the survey, and you can grab it now, or you can go ahead and wait for the email that you'll get tomorrow and fill out this. It's a very short survey. In fact, I'll just share it here so you can see that it's not like we're going to be asking you a whole bunch of questions.
Marianne, while you're doing that, we're almost at
Yes.
we've got 6 more minutes, and in
Okay.
that time, Marianne, could we ask the folks to just put in the text box 1 or 2 words that that describe what they're walking away with from tonight's presentation? So I'll start off first. And please type in, what the feeling, emotion, an adjective that describes what you're walking away with. And any kind of comments, that would be awesome. Thank you so much.
And really, thank you everyone for attending. I hope this was informative, and we will get you the information on the February 20 meeting to anyone that indicates interest in that, and I'll email that after the meeting. Anyone, any other comments, or feel free to unmute yourself and just chat if you like, or go ahead and we'll kind of finish off the meeting. And thank you for attending.
Thank you, Marianne. Appreciate it. Bye, y'all.
Bye, everyone.
Good night, Marianne and Moises. Lovely
Thank you, Ann.
presentation, so informative.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for joining.
Marianne, do you know if there's a way that we can copy or capture all the comments and questions in the chat box? I don't
Yes.
know of.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, you just save the chat.
Love it.
Yeah, I've already done that. I'll just do it again just to make sure I catch the last comments. So yeah, it's saved. And now I have to go find it, but it's in there somewhere. So yeah. All right.
Wow, we ended early.
We
I'm
did, just right on
surprised.
time. That's
Yeah,
good.
I'm like, I thought we were, I was rushing, man. I was just, I'm glad that, yeah, it turned out great.
It turned
in
out
terms of
just right.
timing.
Yeah, just timing was good, and yeah. So we still have a couple people on, so I'm going to go ahead and say goodnight and leave. It's been a long day. I'm sure it has been for you too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Marianne.
Okay, thank you, folks that are still here. Bye-bye. We're going to close the meeting.